Hello and most welcome to 810 of the Heidegger series. We will today continue with Wittgenstein and Zen by John V. Canfield. And we gotten deeper and deeper into the investigation how practice is what makes word function. And this is the writing of Wittgenstein, for instance, was in the late 40s into the early 50s. This article we are holding is from 75, the origin, if I remember correctly. Today, this is confirmed by science. Words are actions. Bergen, who wrote Louder Than Words, that's a very good introduction to how words are sort of actions, not static pointers, not at all sign and signified or intention extension. That view is disappearing from science as we speak. An interesting confirmation of the deep understanding of Wittgenstein. We also mentioned earlier Rolf Pfeiffer with just one F, the Swiss researcher who shows that robots or mobiles, which they could be called as well, can move about without a central processing unit or anything that we used to think was necessary for the direction and leading of any live things. No, it is the movement itself that learns. It is also the movement that remembers. So movement, action, doings, all the words, and our misunderstanding of that has led to quite extensive problems in modern days. From the side of Ian McGilchrist, there is even suggestion that mental illnesses of different kinds stem from the idea that you can just have concepts in your head and your imagination is just enough, so you don't have to do anything. I'm pretty sure that the modern generation has come to believe those things even more than was previously possible. No, what becomes real also in quantum mechanics is not a particle or a thing that lights go to and then, so to speak, gets reflected. No, what is real in quantum mechanics sorry, yeah. Thank you, Kalle. See how the more we are involved in that doing, the more real things become. Reality stems from engagement in the doing, and for every repetition, it gets strengthened, gets stronger. In the last reading, there were references to a simple child's game, ring a roses, where we learn to stick certain activities to certain words. That does not mean that the words mean the activity, but they come together. And this togetherness, this is the language game meeting the life world. I would say also the life world has today been confirmed by science, something called global reality, especially by Misters Alan Aspect, Seilinger, and Clauser, who on the 10th of December last year received the Nobel Prize. These Nobel laureates have proven that reality is not local. That means it is not a separate, controllable area like the earth or your living room or the lab or something else. Every relation in the whole of the universe needs to come into count. That is most definitely the life world of Ludwig Wittgenstein. This is also pointed to by Carlo Rovelli, the Italian physicist, and I can most deeply recommend his latest book, Helgoland. It's a good read, and it points to quantum relation, where everything is interwoven in the grand weave of reality, not disjunct, not the idea that the word is separable and that I can have it in my insideness, in my black box, and that it will point to something sharply out there, unrelated. That was killed off with the example beetle in the box, but it was also killed off by quantum mechanics. It is there called entanglement. The connection between Wittgenstein and quantum mechanics has not really been looked into deeply. This is maybe some of the listeners would be interested in doing that, who has enough knowledge. I have found very little into that area so far. I will continue my read. It's the second of those rather long paragraphs that the author ornates the text with. The last word was destroyer. We can think of both the ostensive definition language game and the builder's language game as two separate sets of patterned activities. Each can be conceived as involving just doing something, just saying slab when a slab is pointed to, and just bring a slab when a builder says slab. That one has mastered the first does not mean that one has mastered the second. Ostensive definition is not what ties language to the world. One does not teach the meaning of words in language by teaching through ostensive definition that such and such words refer to such and such objects. To learn the meaning of words, one must be taught a language game proper. That is the builder's or destroyer's language game. Language games. And in being taught a language game, one will be taught to use words as one is taught carpentry. One is taught to do certain jobs with certain tools. One learns the different role or function of a word, not necessarily by having the function described, but by learning how to function with the word. For instance, the builder learns how to get slabs through by learning how to use slab. And the destroyer learns how to get slabs destroyed by learning a different use of slab. 9. Countless rules. Words do not have one job, to stand for something or for an idea, but many different ones. But we must try to get clear both the idea of a role, job, function, use of a word, and the idea that words have countless different kinds of roles. The comparison between a word and a chess piece is instructive. The word by itself is dead, a mere noise, just as the piece by itself is dead. A mere piece of carved wood. What makes this piece of carved wood into a chess king is first of all the existence of the practice, the pattern activity of playing chess. And what differentiates the king from the queen is not merely their different shapes, but the fact that the king, a piece of this shape, has one role in the game, and the queen, a piece of another shape, has a different role in the game. The king, but not the queen, can be moved in such and such a way. The object of the game is to checkmate the king and not the queen. The king cannot be moved into check, but it makes no sense to speak of checking the queen, and so on. As the practice of playing chess turns a piece of wood into a chess piece, so the practice of playing a language game turns a sound into a word. There are many different kinds of games and many different roles that tokens play in these games. Compare the role of a house in Monopoly, an ace in poker, a black stone in Go, etc. In the same way, there are countless different language games and countless different roles words play in them. We can get a better idea of such differences by looking at the functions of some words in a language game with which Wittgenstein contrasts the slam and beam language game. And this is from Philosophical Investigations. Now, think of the following use of language. I send someone shopping. I give him a slip marked 5 red apples. He takes the slip to the shopkeeper, who opens the drawer marked apples. Then he looks up the word red in a table and finds a color sample opposite it. Then he says the series of cardinal numbers. I assume that he knows them by heart. Up to the word 5. And for each number, he takes an apple of the color as the sample out of the drawer. It is in this and similar ways that one operates with words. But how does he know where and how he is to look up the word red? And what is he to do with the word 5? Well, I assume that he acts as I have described, Explanations come to an end somewhere. But what is the meaning of the word five? No such thing was in question here. Only how the word five is used. The word five has quite a different job from the word red, and both have different jobs from that of the word apples. To be able to use the word five to understand it, the shopkeeper must have learned to say a series of words off by heart without varying their order. The job of the word five is, as it were, to signal the place in this series where he is to stop. Mastery of the word red, on the other hand, involves the use of the kind of color chart discussed in part 1. Red has a certain job to do in the process or activity of passing from word to color patch and of matching objects against color patches. It designates the starting point of this process. And apples is compared directly with a set of names written on drawers. Through this comparison, he learns where it is that he is to find the objects with respect to which he is, as it were, to amalgamate the process of counting and color matching. Further examples from among the countless different roles that words may have can be found quickly by considering, as Wittgenstein suggests, exclamation alone with their completely different functions. He lists go, oh, help, fine, no. One could not understand these words by understanding what they stood for. They do not stand for anything. And one can see that they do very different jobs. The kinds of roles words can have is countless, because there are countless kinds of language games and variations on existing language games that could be invented. In the same way, there are countless kinds of human customs that we can conceive human beings to have. To understand a concept is to be able to use the corresponding word or words in the language game, or to be able to play the language game or one of the language games in which a word expressing the concept as a whole. Thus, mastery of a concept consists not in having some idea or other, but in having a certain skill, namely being able to participate by means of just doing in a certain pattern of interaction. This just doing will consist in using the word in the language game to do a certain job, namely that job which it is the word's role in the language game to do. In this sense of concept, the word is robbed of any mental attributes, and in this sense, to have a concept is not to have some particular idea. In this sense of a concept, an enlightened person, for example, a Zen master, can, like anyone else, have concepts. For he, like anyone else, can participate in the language games in question. The Tao manifests itself in certain patterned activities, language games. The Zen master, like everyone else, can participate in these patterns. Three, the mystical base of language. 10. The central point. But how does he know where and how he is to look up the word red? And what is he to do with the word 5? Well, I assume that he acts as I have described. Explanations come to an end somewhere. That is in itself important. The point at which explanations come to an end is the point at which the person acts as described. He just does what he does without the mediation of thoughts. Part 1 of this paper has shown that it is not necessary to think that such actions need, at some point or other, to be mediated by thoughts. Part 2 has shown how Wittgenstein conceives of language as based upon such just doings. Understanding without thought occurs when certain activities take place in the absence of thought, namely the activities in the patterned human interactions that constitute language games. But the idea of activity without thought has, it is already clear, certain obvious resonances in the literature of Buddhism. And so we come to the heart of the matter. Buddhism and Taoism has obvious affinities. Consider this well-known passage from Chuang Tzu. If a man having lashed two hulls together is crossing a river and an empty boat happens along and bumps into him, no matter how hot-tempered the man may be, he will not get angry. But if there should be someone in the other boat, then he would shout out to haul this way or veer that. If his first shout is unheeded, he will shout again. And if that is not heard, he will shout a third time. Thus, this time with a torrent of curses following. In the first instance, he was not angry. Now in the second, he is. Earlier, he faced emptiness. Now he faces occupancy. If a man could succeed in making himself empty and in that way wander through the world, then who could do him harm? The man who wanders in emptiness is the theist sage. He wanders in emptiness because his mind is empty. And his mind is empty because it is empty of all thought. Two points may then be made. First, having a mind empty of thoughts obviously does not keep the theist sage from telling clever stories and parables. And in general, does not keep him out of meaningful linguistic exchange. We have seen, at least in outline, how in Wittgenstein's view this can be. Second, this very thoughtless activity including that involved in linguistic exchange, in speaking and understanding, is itself the Tao, the goal and fulfillment of the theist religious quest. So page 403 now. In Buddhism, this thoughtless activity is nirvana, or the enlightened state. This is the point that must now be emphasized. The achievement of thoughtless activity in Taoism and in Zen is priceless. If the goal of the religious quest is looked on as a triumphant solution to the mystery of life and death, then it is achieved when there is a total absence of thought. For such an achievement, priceless is too poor a word. Perhaps an idea of the value given in Zen to the achievement can be got from such poems as the following from a Chinese master. Until today, the precious gems being buried, now it flashes from the earth, minds clear. At last, Zen sitting, a stick of incense, lights the universe. I bow to the Bodhidharma. We have reached the point at which Wittgenstein and Zen can be seen to converge. In Zen, to be enlightened is to live free of thoughts. For Wittgenstein, the activities that make up linguistic exchange are not mediated by thoughts. Thus, at the least, Wittgenstein provides a compelling view of language that is consistent with Buddhist doctrine concerning thought. If language works in the way portrayed by Wittgenstein, there's no incompatibility between living free of thoughts in the manner of the Zen master and participating fully and with full understanding in the day-to-day use of language. Moreover, it appears that for Wittgenstein, the base of language is exactly that mode of existence which in Zen is the culmination as well as the starting point of the religious life. We might put this, although with danger of being misunderstood, as for Wittgenstein, language has a mystical base. A misleading model, one understanding likely to come up here, if not earlier, is a function of once proposing the Cartesian or ordinary man's model of mind. Central to this model is the idea of an inside and an outside. Outside are chairs, tables, other people, and so on. Inside are thoughts, feelings, sense impressions, pains, and so on. And standing behind these inside things is the I. The perceiver and the initiator of actions. The I is inside the inside, as it were. We locate the I at a great distance from the world in part because we think of it as on this side of our thoughts, which in turn are already at a great distance from the table, the typewriter, chairs, etc. This is the model that virtually everyone has on himself as an inner being, an isolated being, cut off from the world and from other people who are at even greater distance than things, since they are as far from tables and chairs, etc., in their own inward direction as he is in his. Assuming this model, the idea of a person with no thoughts is understood via a process of deletion. We imagine a full mind emptied out, an inside without content, a mental vacuum. Hence, I believe the tendency to think of Wittgenstein as some kind of behaviorist and the horror which some react to the Zen notion of emptiness. But Wittgenstein's aim, and in a different way, Zen's aim, is to explode this whole picture of an inside and an outside. This is why Wittgenstein tries to put one in a position of seeing, and of seeing from many different standpoints, the senselessness of a private language that is a language that tries to get its sense via reference to private inside entities. This whole inside-outside model is a delusion. One is not to think of emptiness in the Taoist or Zen sense, nor in the sense needed to understand the Weltanschauung of Wittgenstein's investigations, as achieved by emptying the Cartesian mind of its contents. Perhaps the model for emptiness here should be rather that of complete fullness. The universe implodes. And with that odd word, we put today's point. 810 ends with implodes. So there's a rather massive amount of quotes here to dwindle about. Yes, page 404. Thank you very much, Kalle. So one of these few times the text spoke so well for itself. It could even be hard to have some quotes, but still so very tempting, of course. Very, very tempting. We go to page, let's see here, just a sec here. Just one sentence on page 399. And in being taught a language game, one will be taught to use words as when one is taught carpentry. One is taught to do certain jobs with certain tools. It's a learning process, repetition instead of ostensive Augustinian definition. I think that could be a memory device. Augustine out, you can see somebody giving the ostensive finger, something similar, to show him out. He stands for the misunderstanding, whereas using the finger properly inside the language game to show somebody, for instance, to the door out of a big building. That is true. This is a good use of the ostensive definition. You learn it by doing it in the context where it was born. And let me mention this, and I add that myself, it also has a history. Doesn't come from nowhere. It is that enormity, that mountain of doings that goes, when it comes to a tool, it can go hundreds of years back. When it comes to religion, it is thousands of years, each on top of each other. On page 400, there is a very, very important note, already at the third line. Page 400, Kalle, please. The third line, let's see here. I need to go up for that one. Words do not have one job, one, to stand for something or for an idea. And I think in that short part of this sentence, we have Saussure, we have Levi-Strauss, we have, to a certain extent, Quine, Norman Quine. Most of analytical philosophy, we have the majority of academia in the Anglo-Saxon countries and Sweden as well. It is just a sign for, sign, signified. But we must try to get clear both the idea of a role of a word and the idea that words have countless different kinds of roles. And nota bene here, I'm going to add something that could be helpful. The idea that you have a sense of meaning to a word, I think that's a side effect of the language game. It is not in itself bad at all. It is meaning, the word meaning or intention, or it's part of the language game. So as long as you use it within the language game, it is absolutely apt. Nothing wrong with it. And here we have that very good example, and I will not read it again, but it is excellent. What makes a chess king a chess king? Is it by comparison with a proper king? Is it reading about the king in the dictionary? Is it reading the rules for chess? No. It can only be had while playing the game. That's the only chance of having the meaning. And it's always a matter of degree. And chess has a massive history as well. So if you get skilled at it, as a friend of mine was, he is standing on a mountain of former masters. So it's pretty massive. So there is, in this comparison, you get to understand there is a cornucopia of language games and worlds. In all these complications, there is an enormity of knowledge. There is an enormity of possible experiences, of constantly learning new things, evolving like as a human person, developing, growing bigger. Growing bigger and bigger and bigger and larger, becoming more self-confident, becoming wiser. All these gifts are possible when you understand the massivity of language games. Countless roles. Not possible to a priori put in one. Can you also now see how the idea that language is this, the Noam Chomsky idea or the common idea, takes away so much understanding? It makes damage to language. While it makes even more, it makes language incredibly small. Here on page 401, just under the short words, go, oh, help, find, no. One could not understand these words by understanding what they stood for. So use these ones and think that goes for all words, because you can go to a dictionary and you can think, well, actually I can look up cathedral and I can look up the word of what's a slab and so on. No, you can get a hint, you need to use it. All words are like go, oh, help, fine, no. And there's a reason Wittgenstein lists this, is to give you a help. You, the reader, you are being taught. This is what words are. And here we have a ground one, and I will not take more commenters, although there are so many good ones here. But page 402. The mystical base of language. It can be called mystical because it cannot be explained, because explanations are inside a language game. And if we were to try to explain, we would do a sort of a priori after the fact. And we once more will make damage to our language skill. Explanations, as it says in the third line, come to an end somewhere. If you try to explain beyond that limit, you will be committing the cosmological fallacy on the world itself, and you will cut off your legs effectively. You will cut off your understanding capacity. You will do damage to yourself. And those questions could include: where does the language game come from? How do you play it? Does it equal culture? Some tool I would use here actually. But you have to make exceptions to show something. Doesn't mean that they are cut in stone. But later I will show a little bit of a teaser to give a hint of how complex words, the outer sheer complexity of words can be enormous. Kalle, maybe a comment here? Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Good to hear.
Let's go to the previous page. This is page 400. So it's here. So this is the paragraph. Or is rather this phrase. The word by itself is dead. A mere noise, just as the piece by itself is dead. A mere piece of carved wood. And I would like to return to this quotation by in the letter to James. James chapter 2, verse 17. Even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. So faith in itself does not help. So here the reference is the word. So instead of faith, we have the word.
Ah, yeah.
While let me compare it what Wittgenstein, this is Canfield's paraphrase. I will go to the original text, so to say, of Wittgenstein, quoted on page 393, I think.
Okay.
393. It was 393. 393. It was here, I think. Let me see. Here. So it's for philosophical investigations, paragraph 432. Wittgenstein writes, every sign by itself seems dead.
Ah, yeah.
So Canfield has changed the word sign into word. I think it's appropriate change. It's instead the usage that is alive. Is not the faith in the word, but it's actually the usage. Faith is the that you think you have inside you, but faith is outside. Is the inside thing. You need outside thing. This is works. You need both, so they're complementary. And this refers also back to the Cartesian dichotomy between outside and inside.
Yes,
You need both. And let me show you a glimpse into another paper by scholar. Here. The title, The Empty Mind of Professor Canfield, by Chris Gudmundsen. The title is a little bit almost insulting to Westerners. The Empty Mind of Professor Canfield. But from a person East, it's complimentary. I don't know what Chris Gudmundsen says in his paper, but this has become a concept. So it's not the empty mind of Wittgenstein, but it's of Canfield. I don't know how many people, Wittgenstein scholars agree with Canfield's conclusion. But as we see here, Wittgenstein is clear, is the usage that is significant, the language game. The words are dead. Words without works are dead. And I think it's a question of both things. I don't know, perhaps a compromise would be the most appropriate. Canfield's position is rather extreme. I don't know. Do you agree with him? Hans?
I think could be a pedagogical tool, if I follow your train of thought. It could be a pedagogical tool to bring it as far as possible to make a point. Because the ideas of Wittgenstein get very crystallized here. And that is one of the reasons I thought this paper was good. But he does take it to an extreme. That's true. That's true. And that does also Wittgenstein at times. because the slab game is an oversimplification, but it is in the reason of showing something to use that as a ladder. I think he calls it a ladder. With that ladder, it would be possible to come up to understanding. And once the understanding is reached, you can leave the ladder.
I think that we have to separate two things. One is the ideal reader or the ideal person. One is the, like in Zen, you have the nirvana is the highest state, then you are without thoughts. But it's few people who achieve that. While I'm certain that Wittgenstein knows that average persons do have thoughts, perhaps in one way, but they should live with them, so to say. And also Canfield also knows that it's only the ideal case when you achieve this sublime position of nirvana, and then you are empty of thoughts. The question is if in the middle position, like an average person, like I don't know who average person, if there is such a thing as average person, those have thoughts.
Yes.
But it's only so. Canfield doesn't make this distinction between an ideal person, like the one who has the ideal person, like the one who has actually been able to empty his thoughts, and the average person who might have thoughts, or does have thoughts, because the Buddhism does acknowledge is that usually you do have thoughts. It's only when you achieve that highest rank, so to say, you are able to keep your thoughts. That's the, I think, the mistake the country doesn't do is that is the ideal and average.
Yes, I think it's an ideal. Yeah, I do agree. And Wittgenstein, I think you can also say that you have thoughts when you have a good use, because the use is the thought, so to speak. And this is what you say about this suggestion. When we have a true thought, it is when we are actually in the doing. And then is when we have a perfect thought, or a better thought, or a clearer thought. Compare it like this. I'm playing a game of chess, and afterwards I can say, oh, I had this most clearest thought, and I realized I should move my queen to the position b4. That is b4. That is a thought, but is in aftertext, but it's still what we mean by a thought. And now that thought is invigorated by doings, and it becomes absolutely strong and real. This is my suggestion here upon hearing what you say.
Yes, I would say that you have a de bono solution. It's always, so to say, after the fact, you can say, after the fact I saw I had a thought, but in the real, so to say, life, you do first the action, and then it looks like you actually had a thought when you didn't have a thought. Because after the fact, it's easy to, yes, I did think about that, but then. We could say, check out some quote. This is only 4 papers by this Chris Gudmundsen. What is, I don't know, what, see, I think. No, I think that you have this actually the same thing in this paper, that Canfield doesn't take in consideration the process. the process from being towards enlightenment, towards the ideal situation. If I want to be a Buddhist and reach nirvana, this is a process. In the beginning, I do have thoughts, probably.
Oh yeah, it must be a process. It's everything is repetition, doing it more and more and more often, and it's like sharpening a knife. The first time you sharpen it, it won't be sharp, but as you repeat it, it gets sharper and sharper and sharper.
Here, I completely agree with this. This is what I wanted to say, actually. Now, to say this, that ordinary people do not have thoughts, is to spoil his whole argument. I completely agree with this point. That is what Canfield misses. And so you have to absolutely, and I think that many things also in philosophy investigations that people get wrong is that they don't make distinction. Let's say you have the duck rabbit. I think for average people, they think it, that Wittgenstein describes what happens to an average person. The average person is or rather a rabbit or a duck. But somebody who's more skilled viewer, he can or she can see it at once. So then this is the nirvana person, so to say.
Yeah. What did you think about the mystical base that explanations can only take us so far, and that there is a tendency in modern society, well, it's been going on since Newton, to ask questions that shouldn't be asked?
Yes, absolutely. I love that. That was on page 20. I will actually go there. It's worth taking that. And it was, I agree that. No, that was, let's leave that. Go back. This was page 20 in the PDF. PDF. So it's here. And let me see, where did we have it? Do you remember exactly which line it was? Explanations come to an end somewhere. Let me see. Here. It was on the, indeed, it was here.
Yeah.
Comments to an end somewhere. Yeah, absolutely, this is a good point. So if we return to the point that we were doing in the last lecture, I asked you, Hans, imagine that you have a teacher who's renaming, relabeling a thing. And then this teacher gives it explanation to this renaming. But of course it comes to an end somewhere, because it must be grounded in history knowledge. It takes time.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be grounded in doings, history, often what we refer to in a somewhat pejorative way, tradition, culture. But in that lies the whole knowledge. And I wanted to end with a photo. I don't know if I can share here. Let's see if I can share this one. See if that's within.
I stop sharing perhaps.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
I will see if I can have an example here. Let's see here. Nice and big photo. So here you see something from Japan, speaking of Zen. This is a Chan no Yu. It's a tea ceremony. And it's a doing that is very complicated and goes back several centuries. And when you learn it, and this is the case with everything that is taught in Japan, you always go to what is referred to as a master, a sensei. and they have the knowledge in their movement, in their doing, in their doings, the whole complexity. So history, if you like, that's not the proper word, but knowledge needs to be grounded that you have the teaching, the movement from another master who in his or her turn, as here, is usually women who are the senseis here, they have received it, and the movements are absolutely exquisite. So this you can compare to our movements, and especially the ones that I referred to earlier, we used to have in the church, where they've been transferred from person to person in an apostolic succession. This is how knowledge travels, so to speak. Yeah, it's an oversimplification, but now you get a hint of what a doing is. And of course, in the movement, you are absolutely aware you have this incredible sharpness of tongue. And this could be reinstated in our world as well, once we're starting to accept more and more the discoveries within neurology, science of cognition, and the great wisdom of people like Wittgenstein, for instance. So, what do you say? Any comment, or should we end here with this nice picture?
Yes, let's end with this nice picture. And
Thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl, for your excellent comments. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Have a very nice morning, day, afternoon, or wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.